Never Trumper Jonah Goldberg blames Glenn Youngkin for the highway shutdown in Virginia, and Youngkin isn't even governor yet. Psaki takes heat for the Biden administration's failure on COVID. Plus, Chuck Schumer and other Senate Democrats try to figure out how to salvage their agenda. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
Okay, friends, welcome to the show. Happy Wednesday. I hope you're having a great week. If you're new to the show, thank you so much for tuning in to the live version of the 13-minute news hour. And as you saw, it's a new year. We're working out a few bugs, but I'm hoping to make this live show a regular thing for these Wednesday evenings. I think it'll be a lot of fun. We'll bring in guests. We'll have some expanded segments, and I think it'll be great. But for tonight, we're going to start with Never Trumper Jonah Goldberg and other non-informed commentators who thought that massive weather-related traffic jam on I-95 heading in from Virginia to Washington, D.C. would be a great opportunity to bash the new Virginia Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin. As you may recall, in November, Youngkin won the election against former Governor Terry McAuliffe in part because McAuliffe said things like this.
So first of all, this shows how clueless Glenn Youngkin is. He doesn't understand what the laws were because he's never been involved here in helping Virginia. But it was not. The parents had to write to veto books, Glenn, not to be knowledgeable about it, also take them off the shelves. And I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision.
You vetoed it.
So, yeah, I
stopped
the bill that I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach.
Parts of Virginia have become ground zero for parents stepping up and getting involved in education, pushing back against left-wing school boards and making a difference. So, didn't go over well at all when McAuliffe said parents shouldn't have a say in their children's education. That issue, along with others, helped propel Youngkin to the win, and thus he is now a target for criticism. And the attack that has erupted over the last 2 days is that he is somehow to blame for the massive shutdown along I-95 from snow and freezing conditions. Jonah Goldberg, you may recall, recently quit Fox News in protest over comments made by Tucker Carlson. He took to Twitter to condemn Youngkin. Now keep in mind that Goldberg is supposedly on our side, but nonetheless, he tweeted this. If I was Glenn Youngkin, I'd be flooding the zone to get this I-95 stuff fixed. DC suburbs are vengeful about this kind of thing. I don't understand this tweet at all. First of all, it's if I were Glenn Youngkin. And secondly, Glenn Youngkin is not governor. The guy is not even governor yet. Democrat Ralph Northam is the governor, and he has been for the past 4 years. So why would Republican Jonah Goldberg even make that post? What's the point of it? And Goldberg wasn't alone in blaming Youngkin. I'll get to some of those comments, but to give you a feel for how bad things were, here's a tweet from Virginia Democrat Senator Tim Kaine. I started my normal 2-hour drive in D.C. at 1 p.m. yesterday. 19 hours later, I'm still not near the Capitol. My office is in touch with Virginia Department of Transportation to see how we can help other Virginians in this situation. Please stay safe, everyone. Can you imagine 19 hours and counting for a 2-hour drive? And that's what drove Goldberg and others to pile on. Of course, they didn't blast Democrat Governor Ralph Northam. They blasted a guy who isn't even governor yet. Here's an example. Looks Youngkin failed his first test in Virginia with traffic stopped for 10 to 12 hours on 95 in Virginia. Failure for Gov. Intelligence on full display. Don't you think people would stop for just a second to make sure they are criticizing the right governor? Here's another. Well, this is not a good start or look for Virginia's governor, Glenn Youngkin. Of course, these folks were blasted on social media, including Goldberg, and even tried to defend himself. When someone on Twitter called out his now deleted tweet, Goldberg responded with this. Yeah, that's fine, but the dunking is stupid. I like Youngkin. Thought he'd been sworn in already, and given that context, the tweet was 100% right. People who want to read my tweet as some lib attack on him are either ignorant or deliberately acting in bad faith. So, Goldberg said that had he been right, then his tweet would have been right. Think about that one. The lesson here is if you're going to bash a fellow Republican, or anyone for that matter, please make sure you have your facts together and then ask yourself, hey, is this just plain stupid to post? Had Goldberg gone through that simple two-step process, we all would have been much better for it. All right, next let's talk about White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and COVID. But first, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, regardless of platform, just search out my name, hit that subscribe button, make sure notifications are turned on. That way you can follow the show and help us grow. Okay, next is White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki and the whole mess with COVID that is now sweeping the country. There have been so many failures by the Joe Biden administration on Afghanistan, the crisis at the southern border, supply chain problems, rising fuel prices, inflation, spending, and more. But one issue that really stands out is Biden's COVID plan. And it stands out because this is something Biden ran on. This is supposedly one of the reasons that voters chose Biden. Recall, Biden famously said this about COVID.
We now have a national strategy to beat COVID-19. It's comprehensive. It's based on science, not politics. It's based on truth, not denial. And it is detailed. It's going to require Congress to pass the American Rescue Plan to provide funding to administer the vaccines, to ramp up testing, to help schools and businesses reopen, and deliver immediate economic relief to Americans who are in badly need of it through no fault of their own.
Biden was going to beat COVID. Well, first of all, COVID is a coronavirus, the same type of virus that includes the common cold. It's out there. Biden is not going to beat it. He talked about schools reopening back then. Now, with probably the mildest form of COVID that we have seen, schools by the thousands are closing because of the mixed message, fear tactics, and not following the science. At yesterday's White House press briefing, Jen Psaki was asked by a CBS reporter, not Fox News or Newsmax, but CBS, about the failure to beat COVID. Here's the exchange.
There is a sense among many that the country has lost control of the virus. Would the White House agree with that?
We would not. And here's why. We're in a very different place than we were a year ago. We have taken steps to prepare for any contingency, any moment, and we're working to implement and build on that from here.
Now, that was a pretty short clip, but in that brief span of time, Psaki was able to pack a whole lot of flat-out lies and nonsense into her statement. First of all, to even pretend that the virus is controllable is kind of ridiculous. Lockdowns, mask mandates, school closures, vaccine mandates. We've had all of that, and the virus just does what it's going to do. Cases go up, cases go down. In the meantime, more and more people are actually vaccinated, yet Biden and Psaki and others continue to blame the smaller and smaller unvaccinated population. That demonization has no basis in fact. Psaki also said that the Biden administration is in a much different place than a year ago. She's right about that. Under Biden, we just hit a new record for COVID cases. Testing's not available, and many are waiting in lines for hours to get a test, and others can't get tested because there are none around. The Biden team is clearly not prepared for any contingency or moment, as Jen Psaki claimed. What's the fallout from this incompetence from Biden? His numbers continue to fall, and here's some analysis from Joe Concha.
So, yeah, there are questions out there from many, many Americans to the point where the press has to do its job in this point. But either way, the president broke that one rule that you can, as a politician or in sales, under-promise, over-deliver. He over-promised and under-delivered. And that's why a new CNBC poll, Todd, out yesterday, finds that a solid majority of Americans now disapprove of this president's handling of the virus. 55% disapproval. Remember, he came into office around 70% approval on this issue. So that's where we are at this point.
Biden has gone from 70% approval on COVID to 55% disapproval. Concha also pointed to another poll, which is actually from CNN, which shows 66% doubt whether Biden was a leader you can trust. And while all of this is going on, Jen Psaki is going out there saying Biden is prepared for anything. I don't think so. All right. Next, let's talk about Senator Chuck Schumer and the rest of the Democrats as they try to figure out what to do next following the end-of-the-year defeat of Biden's Build Back Better legislation. Democrat West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin helped kill the bill with the help of a united Republican front in the Senate. This brought the ire of Biden and Schumer and others, but despite efforts at arm twisting, Manchin remained firm, and the plans for a vote on the legislation were put on hold. But what happens now? The Democrats still have a majority in the House and Senate, but what can they do with it? Here's the story. Senate Democrats returned to Washington on Tuesday with their domestic agenda in shambles and searching for a way to save face. Senate Majority Leader Charles Schumer is publicly pleading to continue work on President Biden's $1.75 trillion Build Back Better Act. Democrat leadership is stressing that the social welfare and climate change package is by no means dead, despite intra-party opposition in a Congress with no margin for error. The negotiations will continue with members of our caucus and with the White House on finding a path forward on Build Back Better, said Mr. Schumer, New York Democrat. As I mentioned before Christmas, I intend to hold a vote in the Senate on the bill and will keep voting until we get a bill passed. That sounds all well and good for Schumer. Just one problem. The Senate Republicans are opposed to the legislation, which means the entire Senate Democrat caucus has to be united in order for it to pass. That hasn't been the case, and Joe Manchin has been firm that he will not support the bill and that no negotiations are occurring. Schumer and the White House see it differently. The White House and Democrat leaders remain adamant that Mr. Manchin's concerns can be alleviated and the bill can advance. I've talked to Senator Manchin numerous times during the break, Mr. Schumer said. I believe the Biden administration will be having discussions with Manchin with his cooperation and participation. Mr. Manchin reiterated that his opposition to the bill remains steadfast. I'm not going to talk about Build Back Better anymore because I think I've been very clear, Mr. Manchin said. There are no negotiations going on at this time. According to the Washington Times story, some Democrats are coming to the realization that the only way to get elements of Biden's socialist spending plan passed is to break it up and vote for it piecemeal. This means that we could be seeing a bill that just focuses on Green New Deal climate activism as an example. But breaking up the bill into piecemeal legislation brings the filibuster back into play, which gives the Republicans a powerful tool to shut things down until after the midterm elections. That's why you'll likely be seeing a renewed push by Schumer and others to get rid of the filibuster. Because of the position Republicans have put themselves in, we will likely have to rely on Joe Manchin or some other Democrat to kill that effort. It's not a great position to be in. All right, next, the far left has not just failed on the border and COVID and Afghanistan, they have also failed in keeping Americans safe. Their efforts, not just rhetoric, but actual legislative efforts to defund the police and put law enforcement officials on the defensive, have led to massive spikes in crime. But it's not just on the police side. Another effort of the left is being soft on crime in general and allowing violent criminals and suspects out on the street by supporting little or no bail. The results have been devastating, and my neighboring county of Harris County, Texas, which includes Houston, is a perfect example. Here's the story. Criminal suspects released on multiple felony bonds in Texas' most populous county have killed 156 people since 2018, according to victim advocates who have criticized bail reform efforts that have seen some people charged with violent crimes and released back onto the streets only to violently reoffend. In Harris County, home to Houston, the largest city in the state, there are 113 defendants charged with capital murder that have been granted bond, Rania Mancarios, CEO of Crime Stoppers of Houston, told Fox News. The group has been tracking statistics in the midst of a change in bond policies. This is unreal. 113 defendants charged with capital murder, and they were granted bond. The result is 156 people who will not see a tomorrow. And these aren't first-time offenders who someone might argue pose no risk because they haven't done anything in the past. No, these are career criminals. Here's more. We were seeing really violent habitual offenders being released on either no bond or ridiculously low bonds. And we said, this is going to wreak havoc, Mancarios said. It's the epicenter for bail reform run amok. Harris County's bail practices underwent a change after officials settled a lawsuit that stopped requiring most people accused of misdemeanor crimes from having to put up cash or large sums to get out of jail. However, some judges have applied such policies in felony cases, said Mancarios. The story goes on to note example after example of multiple time offenders being released only to then take another innocent human life. One such example was an 80-year-old grandmother who was stabbed outside of Walgreens after having purchased a greeting card. The suspect was killed, but prior to him killing this poor woman, he had been arrested 67 times and was out on bond. Overall, Houston ended 2021 with 473 homicides, which is a 20% increase from 2020. It's time for real reform, and letting habitual violent criminals out free to hunt down their next victim is not what I call reform. Friends, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget, if you're new to the show or haven't subscribed yet, regardless of platform, just search out my name, hit that subscribe button, make sure notifications are turned on. That way you can follow the show and help us grow. Thank you so much for tuning in. Our next show is going to be Friday evening at the usual time, 6:30 p.m. Central. Until then, I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour. All right, friends, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button above. Once you do, tell your friends, share it, spread the word about the 13-minute news hour so we can keep growing. And for more great content, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you next time.